Well, you asked the question in your book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, what is the Federal Reserve, and what is your answer?
Well, what it is, it's a cartel. It's not a government agency. It has the appearance of it being a government agency, and they went to great lengths to give it that facade. It does have the power of government because Congress voted to give the power of enforcement to it. But in its essence, underneath it, it's a cartel. It's nothing different than a banana cartel or an oil cartel or sugar cartel. It happens to be a banking cartel. They got together, they drew up the rules and regulations for their own industry, to self-regulate their own industry is what cartels do, and then they sent it to Congress, and they took off the label at the top that said banking cartel, and they erased that, and they said Federal Reserve Act. Congress passed it into law, and that's why we think it's a government agency, is because if you don't obey the rules that they set down for their own industry, you go to prison. And so it looks like a government agency. But basically the answer to your question is it's a banking cartel.
So now we have to abide by it because it's law, and if we don't, we go to prison, which is why people think it's a government agency, because, only government can put you in prison, right? Well, no, not right. Not if you're very wealthy and very clever, you can buy governments. So now we get back to the answer to your question. What is it? Today, it controls the money system. It controls who gets money, what the interest rates are. All the important elements of commerce are controlled by this private group in the name of the government, and it's become so powerful over the years that the role has completely reversed. It was created by the government. It was, in other words, a contract issued by the federal government, just like the states issue contracts or legalize corporations and so forth at the state level. This is like a national corporation that was created by the national government. And so the government created it, but now over the years the role of master and servant has been reversed, and now we come to the amazing and horrible conclusion that the government doesn't control the banks. The banks control the government. So now we answer the question, what do we have here that it shouldn't be? And that is it. It is our master. And most people don't know it.
So in your view, the bill, the Federal Reserve from the beginning was a ploy?
Oh, absolutely, it was a ploy. It was a brilliant piece of strategy. These people were not stupid. They're great psychopoliticians, they're great strategists. And in fact, while the bill was being debated in Congress, some of these people went before the public. They gave speeches knowing it would be reported in the press, and they were interviewed by journalists, and they said, oh, this bill that they had written on the side, nobody knew it, but they said, this bill is not going to be good for business. It's bad for America. And they actually did that ploy. And knowing full well that the average guy would read that in the newspaper and say, these big bankers don't like the bill, must be pretty good, These fellows were brilliant, and that's how they sold it. So what happened there is that they knew that there was going to be some kind of a move to control banking. They knew that Congress was going to pass some kind of a law to regulate banking. And so instead of being stupid about it and just sitting back and saying, I hope they don't do too bad, they decided to take the lead. They said, we'll write the bill. We'll make sure that it's to our liking. And so that's what it's all about. They went to Jekyll Island where nobody knew they were going, where they had a meeting that was in a great deal of secrecy. They denied that they went for many years thereafter, But they actually drafted the Federal Reserve Act on Jekyll Island in 1910, and then the next 3 years it took that much time to promote it and get it through Congress.
The Federal Reserve Act wasn't drafted in Congress. It was drafted on a private island off the coast of Georgia in 1910. Here is the island, Jekyll Island. And it was drafted under great secrecy. Jekyll Island was the retreat for billionaires like William Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan. And in 1910, Senator Nelson Aldrich, the Republican whip in the Senate and the chair of the National Monetary Commission, sent his private railroad car to the New Jersey Railroad Station, where he and 5 other men were instructed to come one at a time and everybody pretend they just didn't know each other. Aldrich, who is the guy, remember, he wrote the original bill, He was a business associate of J.P. Morgan. Oh, and the father-in-law to John D. Rockefeller Jr. So there's no special interest happening there. There was also Abram Piatt Andrew, Assistant Secretary of the Treasury, and Frank Vanderlip, representing William Rockefeller, Henry Davidson and Benjamin Strong with J.P. Morgan, and Paul Warburg. He was a partner at Kuhn, Loeb and Company. He was representing the Rothschild banking family. Oh, he's going to talk about the Rothschilds now. He actually is an interesting character. If you ever saw Little Orphan Annie, Daddy Warbucks was named after Warburg. These are the men that represented 1/4 of the entire wealth of the world. You think we got a problem with wealth now? Those guys, 1/4 of all of the money in the world. The Morgans, the Rockefellers, the Warburgs, the Rothschilds, all in one room. Yeah, but when do they start sacrificing chickens? Well, it doesn't happen. That I'll tell you. These guys were all competitors. According to G. Edward Griffin, who we'll talk to in a minute, they all had come together to form a banking cartel so they didn't have to compete against each other. He says it was like an oil cartel or a sugar cartel, but this cartel actually went into partnership with the government. I mean, how great is that, huh? It's kind of like the drug cartels in Mexico. Wait, I didn't say that out loud, did I? So for more than a week, these men sat around there. And they sat around this big table and they hammered out all the details of what became the Federal Reserve System with 5 objectives. How many of these do you agree with? 1, to stop the growing competition from the nation's newer banks. That doesn't sound good. 2, to obtain a franchise to create money out of nothing for the purpose of lending. That one really doesn't sound good either. 3, to get control of the reserves of all of the banks so the reckless ones wouldn't be exposed to currency drains or bank runs. Oh, that's the charity part. Golly gee, beef, thank you so much. Then, to shift the losses from the bank owners to the taxpayers. It just gets better and better for you and me, doesn't it? No. Again, the answer is no. And then finally, to convince Congress that the purpose was to protect the public. Well, they started the Federal Reserve with no money, just a checkbook. The government could go to the Fed and obtain instant money without having to consult the taxpayer. What a country! Money created out of nothing and then given to the government. It's loaned by the banks to you and me, and then we pay interest on it, and it goes to them. Interest on nothing. Again, the Fed is nothing more than a cartel like OPEC, except it's a money cartel. And this cartel that brought the federal government into a partnership where you and I have to answer to it. And it's only to enforce the rules of the cartel, to bring those into agreement with the federal laws to protect you. It operates under the protection of the federal government, and the government has virtually given a monopoly to create the nation's money supply. There are no elected officials. There are virtually no accountability to anyone. The president doesn't get to say, I'm going to name Glenn Beck as the head of the Fed, which, oh, please. Sarah, when you're in, I'm available. Oh, did I say that one out loud too? Can't do that. The Fed gives the president a list to choose from. Really? Well, thank you, Chairman Mao. The Fed is privately owned, but by whom? Good question. No one knows. We can't open their books, and we don't know who owns them. Really? Now, here's an interesting spin from the Federal Reserve Board website. Although they're set up like private corporations and member banks hold their stock, the Federal Reserve banks owe their existence to an act of Congress and have a mandate to serve the public. Oh, therefore, they're not really private companies, but rather owned by the citizens of the United States.
Founded by David Rockefeller, the Trilateral Commission has been an arm of the globalist deep state since 1973. Last week, at their annual meeting, a speaker who cannot be identified according to Commission rules said that we are now in a period of structural inflation that will last for decades. They said that the free market is over and industry now sets policy. And they said that this year, 2023, is year one of this new global order. Days later, the Federal Reserve Bank announces a July launch for their new FedNow service, which was first announced in October of 2021. The too big to fail banks and all the large processors are already on board, and so is the U.S. Treasury. The first week of April, the Federal Reserve begins the FedNow pilot program for early adopters to become certified participants to help the Fed confirm readiness for their July launch. FedNow is an instant payment processing system that seeks to be the base of all digital transactions, acting as an umbrella company to manage all financial payments. This has been shown to be the gateway to a central bank digital currency, CBDC. FedNow is much like the Reserve Bank of India's instant payment system, the Unified Payments Interface, or UPI. UPI has had huge success in converting rural communities into a complete cashless society. According to the International Monetary Fund, UPI democratized the payment system and paved the way for central bank digital currencies. Central bank instant payment processing is also how the Central Bank of Nigeria introduced its CBDC, Naira, which has been, so far, violently rejected. Reporting for InfoWars, this is Greg Reese.